This is Pod Populi, podcast for the people.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Femme Force podcast. My name is Rachel Pascan, and I am your host. And today I am super excited because I get to talk to Katherine, who is a multi-business owner and entrepreneur who became a CEO at 30. So she is going to talk about her diverse work experience. She's worked in private equity to launching and scaling businesses. And she's also really passionate about helping women succeed in all of their entrepreneurial dreams. And she helps women in travel groups, corporate offsites, retreats, and just is going to talk to us about the different paths to entrepreneurship, how she built and balances multiple businesses, and the power of travel for both personal and professional growth, which we all know I'm super passionate about. So, Katherine, thank you so much for coming on. I'm super excited to have you.
Thank you. So am I. I'm really happy to be here.
So, tell the audience just a little bit about your background and how you've gotten to, where you are now.
I had a growing up life of living all over the place. I think I lived in 4 different states. Travel's always been really important to me. And post-college, I actually moved abroad to Morocco, where I worked for a travel company for several years. I love travel. That was really what sparked my interest in entrepreneurship, was working for a small business. I was the eighth employee. Over my 3 years, we grew to 30. I got to see what it's like to grow and scale a business. And I became very passionate about entrepreneurship. I returned to the US because of the pandemic and the halting of all travel, and pivoted. I ended up working in private equity, running an IT business of all things, which I had zero experience in, but it was a really good education in sort of commercial rigor, how to run a business at scale, how to run a business for profitability, and realized, though, that I was missing travel and missing being in an industry I was passionate about. And so ended up buying 2 travel businesses in 2024. And so I've been running those for a little over 6 months now. And it's just been a phenomenal experience to finally be in a place where I'm getting to do entrepreneurship, but I'm also getting to do it in an industry that I'm passionate about. I'm learning a lot about myself, a lot about business, and I'm really excited to share more about how, there are multiple paths to entrepreneurship. It's not just founding a business. There are ways to get involved through buying a business, scaling your side hustle, all of that.
And it's such an interesting story. And I'm sure the private equity portion of your career had to help with a lot about like learning how to scale and sell and acquisitions and everything. So all journeys help lead you to where you're supposed to be. What were your biggest takeaways from your time in private equity that helped you as an entrepreneur?
I think 2 positive things and 1 negative thing that I think was ultimately what pushed me to be an entrepreneur myself rather than operating businesses for private equity. So private equity is very good about really using data to drive decision making. And I think that's something that you're not going to learn, even if you have an MBA or even if you go to a finance degree. They'll teach you how to analyze data, but it's how do you take the data and then make really good decisions and run experiments based on that. And I think I hadn't learned those skills in college or my MBA. I had to learn them on the job, but that was something that I think is missing from a lot of businesses, where they're collecting all of this data and they have a strategy and a vision, but those 2 things aren't necessarily connected. And so I learned a lot about how to run experiments and say, hey, we want to achieve more website viewership. What are 3 things that we can test over the course of a month and gather data and then see which one of those works best, and then lean in and put our marketing dollars behind the thing that has worked best because we ran an experiment. Yeah. So I think that's one piece of advice that I continue to use in running the businesses today. The second thing is revenue is often what people focus on, when in fact, the money that you're going to take out of your business is driven by profits. And you hear about venture scale businesses and businesses with VC money, and they're all unprofitable. And it's okay because they're raising billions of dollars for venture capital investors who are continuing to fund these businesses. But when you're thinking about being at least an entrepreneur on a small scale, what matters is the profit that you're left with at the end of the day. And so paying really close attention to the financials of my business and making sure that I'm not overspending on marketing or overspending on software that is fun, but I don't actually need, because if I use up all of my revenue and have expenses that are exceeding my revenues, then having an unprofitable business is a very good way to not have any salary, not be able to pay yourself any money, and not be able to sustain your business. So that was something where it's not just about sales and increasing revenue, it's also about how do you make sure your business is profitable and the costs are being controlled such that you have money left over to pay yourself, and then eventually reinvest in the business as well. And the thing that I think ultimately drove me out of private equity that I learned is just that private equity doesn't really care about anything besides profits. And I think that there's a lot of businesses and a lot of investors out there who will say, we care about people, we care about doing the right thing by our employee. And I was constantly put in positions where I had to choose between making 2 or 3% more profit on the year versus giving my employees who are working incredibly hard a raise, or being able to retain an employee because they have a competitive offer. And I know they're valuable to the business, but the private equity fund doesn't want to pay an extra $2,000 a month. And I think that wore on me very quickly, because I got into entrepreneurship because I like the people side of business. I like being able to hire talent, develop talent, really find ways to grow a business through growing the people. And that was why I ultimately decided to leave, was because I felt like the fund I was working for, at least, cared a lot more about profits than it cared about people. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur who could make a decision to spend money on high quality talent and support my employees, even if maybe that means that we are 2 or 3% less profitable for a year.
I mean, but that's such a good option to do, because then when you're good to people, like, they're going to be loyal to you, they're going to work harder, their profitability goes, or their productivity goes up, which then profitability goes up, all of these different things. So I think it sounds like, I mean, it's a very, in private equity, male dominated kind of industry. So I feel like when the females come in, like, we're just a little more in touch with our emotions and understand how people work and how, life happens and all of these things. So I think it's a really great quality to have, to be in a place that you're in and doing, which is amazing. So many people think entrepreneurship is only about the startups. And so what are some alternative paths to business ownership? Because you bought your businesses that were already started, but now you have them flourishing and you're doing different things.
So this is something I learned about in my MBA, and it's something that I'm really eager to help people who don't go to their MBA learn about. And I think it is a path to entrepreneurship. They call it entrepreneurship through acquisition or completing a search fund. There's a lot of jargon around it, but ultimately it's actually the way I think entrepreneurship has been done for generations. It's just that people don't talk about it, which is that someone has a business, they get older, they're ready to retire, and they need to find somebody else who wants to run that business. Oftentimes it's an employee at their company already, maybe it's their child, but more and more there's this generational shift where most businesses are owned by baby boomers and Gen X, and they're reaching the age where they don't want to be working really, really hard anymore. And the choice is, okay, well, I need to find a successor for my business or my business shuts down. And I learned about this, I saw the opportunity, and I knew I wanted to move back to travel. And so I was able to find 2 entrepreneurs who had started their businesses back in the early 2000s, one in 2014 and one in 2017, and were very passionate about finding someone to take their business on as they took a step back. And so I completed those acquisitions, and I learned a lot about M&A. I'd been working in private equity. I thought I knew a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, but I do think that it is a underrated way to become an entrepreneur, because you have a lot less startup risk. I think the biggest thing that you hear is that most businesses fail in their first year of existence. And so by buying a business that had a decade-long track record, I knew that even if I couldn't grow the business as much as I want, it had been profitable for a decade. Chances were it was going to be really hard to ruin the business. There were things that it may not grow as fast as I want, but the risk of it becoming bankrupt was very low. And I think that most of the time when you start a company, you're starting from zero revenue and all you have is costs. I was able to buy a business that had consistent revenue, was doing a little under $1 million a year in revenue. And yes, it had costs, and we needed to figure out ways to make the business more profitable, be able to reinvest to keep growing the company. But I knew that we had money coming in the door already instead of having to go find that first customer. I think the first 5-10 customers are always the hardest to find.
I can only imagine.
And so being able to buy a company that had an existing customer base was really attractive to me and sort of reducing my personal risk. It is a little bit different in the sense that when you start a business from scratch, you probably don't have to outlay that much money at the beginning. You just pay money for the things as costs incurred to buy a software or CRM, to, hire your first employee, et cetera. I was incurring a lot of existing costs because there were existing customers and products. And I had to pay money to buy the business from the entrepreneur. But there are a lot of great programs lending specifically from banks that are focused on helping people acquire businesses. So there's something called an SBA loan, which is the Small Business Administration. Most local regional banks provide these, and they are specifically designed as a way to help people become entrepreneurs and to buy businesses that are already existing. Banks love that, where, again, this is a business that exists. They know it's been profitable. It has a track record, and they're more than happy to lend to someone who is a qualified entrepreneur to buy that business and then grow it. And in many ways, it's less risky for a bank to lend to an existing business who has a new owner than it is for them to lend, again, to someone starting something from scratch. And so while I think it can seem like, oh my gosh, how am I going to raise the money to buy these businesses? There are really good programs out there to help entrepreneurs take that leap of buying a business. And I'm always happy to connect in longer detail about how all of that works.
Well, I mean, and you have to be a go-getter. Number one, to just be an entrepreneur, but also to find these resources. I don't feel like, it's talked about a lot or they're readily available. And so that's got to be, you have to really want to be able to do this and figure it out to find the information and do what you want to do, which is impressive. So you're young, you're a 30-year-old CEO, which is phenomenal. I mean, and you've obviously been a woman leading a business at a very young age, and you have an amazing confidence, and you've earned respect in this male-dominated space. But what challenges did you face as a young female CEO, and how do you navigate those?
I think the biggest challenges really were when I came in to lead the IT company for the private equity fund. I moved to Cincinnati. IT is notoriously a male industry. There was one female employee, and she was the office manager of the business. I was the only other female. It was really challenging to get people to take me seriously. I think also because I didn't have a lot of industry expertise, and they were like, well, why should we listen to Katherine? And my opinion was always that I'm going to show you the results, and I'm going to convince you through success and through helping you see that, okay, if we do these things, we all make more money, we all are happier, our customers are happier. Making it less about you have to trust me and more about, let me show you the results so that you will want to do the same things that I am suggesting, because you're seeing how it benefits you and how it benefits the company. And that was challenging. It took a lot of time, but I am very proud that even after leaving that company, I have very good relationships with most of those employees. I stay in touch with them. They're folks who, I feel very proud to have called colleagues and to have called a team that I worked for. And I think that they have always been very eager to sort of stay in touch with me. And they're always like, if you want to come back and work for us, which is great. I think that's all I wanted, was to leave that company in a better place than I had joined it as. And I think developing those relationships, even though I was decades younger and a woman, not a man, everyone sort of really did take me seriously by the end, because I was able to deliver wins early on. And so I think that's a big piece of advice I have for anybody who's coming into any new job, is if you can put up some wins on the table, like simple things that you prove that by making 2 or 3 changes, there are positive things that you've done for the business, people are going to take that seriously. They're going to all of a sudden want to work with you, listen to you more. And I think that having those quick wins early on in your career or early on in your job is really important. And that was very similar coming into running these 2 businesses. They were already owned by women, which made a big difference. It wasn't, if the teams are all women. So I don't think there was the same gender dynamic going on, but I think people were suspicious of, there's a new owner. Is things going to change? How is this going to impact my job? Is she the right person? She's a lot younger than the founders. And people had a lot of questions. But again, I really focused in my first month. I knew that it was like the crunch sales period where we had a big sale coming up. I needed to really prove that I had the sales and marketing skills that I had said, hey, we're going to grow this business. And by doing that, by having and delivering really good results in sort of those first 6 weeks of sales where I owned the business, I think everyone said, okay, what Katherine said she could promise, she is delivering on. And that made, again, a really big difference in earning their trust. So I think words are important when you come into a new job, and words are important when you're a leader, but actions are actually far more important. And that's what people are going to respect and respond to more than if you're saying things but not following through on your promises.
No, but that's so true though. Like you have to deliver at the end of the day. You can't be all talk, no action. So, I mean, it's great that you have learned that from such a young age and you're able to spread that message to other women and to other young women to be like, you got to deliver. You've got to do that. And that's phenomenal. So like you're running multiple businesses, like you're living a life, you're doing all the things. And so, I mean, you have a lot going on. So let's talk about like how to avoid burnout and stay motivated and all this. What are your best strategies for balancing multiple businesses, without burning out?
I would say I'm not an expert on this at all. I definitely have weeks where I am completely exhausted and I don't have much motivation at all. I think what I always come back to is, why did I buy these businesses?
Yeah.
I really care about travel. I care about delivering exceptional experiences in destinations that people might be nervous about going to by themselves, or might have heard things in the news that make them feel like, can I really travel to the Middle East? Or is it safe for me to go to Latin America? And being able to help people see those places, experience cultures, connect with local people, and come back being sort of an ambassador for the world. That's what I'm most passionate about. And as long as I can come back to talking with my customers every week or occasionally hosting trips, I just came back from hosting a trip to the Galapagos in Ecuador. That's really fulfilling and meaningful to me. And I think that that's where, when I am feeling burnout or a little bit of lack of motivation, lack of focus, talking to my customers and reminding myself about why I am doing this very hard and exhausting thing usually helps me sort of recenter and feel motivated and excited and inspired once again to be working. I think the other thing is being really clear with yourself about when you're managing, especially multiple businesses, or say you're starting a side hustle, but you also have your main job, blocking specific time each day and each week to focus on one business versus the other. That's something that I was not doing. And I was very working all over the place the first few months. And a big part of 2025 for me has been to say, like, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm focused on this business. Tuesday, Thursday, I'm focused on this business. I'm a big fan of blocking time on your calendar and saying, I'm going to work on this task from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And holding yourself accountable to doing that. Again, I'm not perfect at it, but I definitely think that that form of scheduling myself specific time to work on specific tasks and to work on one business or the other and not letting myself get distracted has meant that I'm a lot more effective at making progress on things rather than getting 50% on 100 things. I can get 100% of the way through 10 things, but those 10 things are a lot more meaningful to the business.
No, but it's good advice because I feel like we're all trying to just do it all and do it all and do all the things and like squeeze every hour into the day. And like, it's so hard. And I always tell people, I'm like, time is your most precious resource. You're not going to get more. You have the same hours in the day as Oprah, as Warren Buffett. Like, they can't buy more hours. They don't earn more hours. Like, it's all about how you like maximize during that time. And so to figure that out, like coming out of college too, and then right into your career is such a big deal. Because I feel like when you get out of college and if you're fortunate enough to get a job right away, that's got to be daunting. I did not get a job right away because we were in the recession at the time, but like daunting to be like, you're going from 22 and like living a college life to like, you're going to a 9 to 5. And then you're doing the activities and you're trying to, the commuting and the dating and all of the things. Like, it's a lot.
It is. And I think I've always been an advocate for setting goals. So, like, my husband always tells the story that I set a goal for myself in, I guess it was 2020 when I moved back after the pandemic. I said, if I don't write down a goal around dating, I'm not going to date. So I said that I was going to go on 10 dates. And lo and behold, like my third date out of 10 was who is now my husband. But I think doing that about not just setting goals in your work life, but also in your personal life and saying, okay, what do I want to accomplish this year in my personal life? And then reflecting back every month, every couple of weeks, looking at your goals and being like, am I making progress on my personal life at the same time as I'm making progress on my professional life? Because I think it's very easy in your 20s when you're out of college, you just want to make as much progress in your professional life and in your career as possible. But one day you're going to realize that you haven't made any of the progress on your personal goals, and you're going to be much more likely to burn out if you're not carving out that time to hang out with friends, build a community, join a sports league, do the things that are fulfilling to you personally. And so I have always been a big advocate of writing down not just my professional goals, but my personal goals. And it's luckily worked out for me that I think setting those goals and being intentional about achieving my personal goals as well has meant that I've been able to follow both roads and have both parts of my life progress at the same time.
I mean, and it's so impressive and it's so phenomenal that you have that. And you're doing just more than all of this. I mean, you're also mentoring and supporting women who are looking to, start or acquire businesses. So what's one piece of advice you'd give to women who want to start a business and they just don't even know where to begin?
So I think figuring out what are your unique things that you're passionate about and your unique skills. I like to think about it as if you had a boss or your best friend and they were going to write a list of things that you are really good at, write it from their perspective, because we're always our worst critics. And so if we can take a step back and be like, okay, but when I get those performance reviews at work that are stellar, and even though I feel like an imposter, what is it that my boss is saying that I'm really good at? Or what are the things that outside of my life I'm spending a lot of time getting a lot of value on that I love, whether it's reading or a hobby or a sport? What are those things that I love? Making that list and then trying to brainstorm ways that you could attach those things that you're passionate that are fulfilling the skills that you enjoy developing to a business outcome or to a business idea. For me, that was how I came back to travel, right? Was I knew that when I was working on travel, when I was planning travel personally or helping friends plan a trip, it didn't feel like work. And so I figured that the best way that I could become an entrepreneur was doing something that I knew I was passionate about, because it wouldn't feel like as much of a burden to be an entrepreneur in travel as it would in another space that I didn't have that same passion. So I think finding the things you're passionate about and brainstorming ways that you can turn those passions into a business. ChatGPT and all of the AI tools are also really good for like that type of brainstorming. And then the final thing I would say is talk to as many other women entrepreneurs as you can. Reach out to people on LinkedIn if they have an interesting story. Go to your local chambers of commerce. That's something I'm a big fan of. Most cities have a chamber of commerce. They often have like a women's mentoring group or a women's meetup on a monthly basis. Go talk to them, hear their stories, figure out how they started their companies, how they got into positions of leadership. I think that talking to a lot of women and understanding their paths, you'll not always find that you can copy them, but there's usually nuggets of inspiration and ideas that you can take from those conversations. And building that network early, even before you've started a business, having that network of other entrepreneurs wherever you're living, so that when you hit a roadblock in your journey, you have people to call on, I think is a huge part of being prepared for entrepreneurship, because you are going to hit roadblocks. It's going to take a lot of grit and resiliency, and having sort of a team, a board, a personal board of mentors that you can call on when you do hit those roadblocks, I think is huge. And not feeling like, oh my gosh, wait, what do I do now? Because I don't know who to talk to.
Yeah, no, and that's phenomenal. And I mean, as you're giving this advice, why do you think more women should consider business ownership as a path to financial freedom?
I think that what ultimately I learned, especially in running businesses for other people, is that the people who own the asset are always the ones who are going to benefit the most. And similar to why you should invest in the stock market and have a portfolio of stocks, right? The ownership of assets we've always seen over the length of history, yes, there are recessions, there are periods of time that the market or specific businesses don't do as well. But, you know, the arc of history has shown that businesses and entrepreneurship is a incredibly wealth generating experience. And just being an employee who only relies on a salary, you're always expendable. I think that was the thing that I realized, even being the CEO of a private equity backed business. If I didn't generate returns for a quarter, I knew I was out, right? Yeah. They could get rid of me. I was an employee, they can replace me. What I really enjoy about being an entrepreneur and owning a business is that I'm in the driver's seat. I get to decide how I spend my time, and no one can fire me, even if we have a bad quarter, even if we have a bad year. Yes, I might not get to take as much salary, or, you know, it might be cutting corners to, you know, make the business survive, but I own that asset. And I'm confident that in the span of 20, 30, 50 years, that the asset will be more valuable 50 years from now than it is today, even if I don't grow it 100x, even if I just grow it a couple percent every single year, that's going to grow to be a much larger business and a much more valuable asset over time. And so I think thinking about ways in which you can own valuable assets, whether that is starting a side hustle and having a small business that you know, aren't running full time, but is generating you a little bit of income each month, or going full on to buy a business that already exists. I think that the more that you can own an asset over time, that's going to generate you far more value and far more money than just being a employee. And it is riskier in some ways, but I think it also, if you think about the fact that as an employee, you are very much expendable in a way that as a business owner, you are not.
Yeah. And I think the point of, like you saying, like it's longevity, like you're in for the long game and not the instant reward, is super interesting. And I think people think like, I'm going to start it and it's going to make money and like bit bam boom. And you're like, no, you need to be in it for the long game for this.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting. I mean, you've already figured that out. So like phenomenal. So you've really focused a lot on travel, which is, I mean, that's my niche, and everything that I love in my life is all about travel and seeing the world and meeting new people and understanding new perspectives and cultures. And so, and I know that it, you know, it fosters you as a person and in your professional life. And it just makes you a better person. And I think it's so important for girls and, you know, young women to travel, because it gives you that sense, not just of freedom, but like accomplishment of like, you can do this on your own. Like, it's possible. And so like when you started with these travel businesses and like all of this, and I know you said you lived in Morocco. So how did your experiences living in Morocco and traveling the world influence your business approach?
I think that it's very similar to what you said. It's the fact that you learn that you can do really hard things. And I think that traveling, living abroad, I moved to Morocco. I knew no one. I took a job. I had to find an apartment. I had studied Arabic. I had studied French. So I knew that I had the basic language skills to be able to get by, but I didn't have a community. I didn't have friends. And it was really hard. I was incredibly homesick for my first 6 months. I thought about quitting the job and moving back to the US pretty much every day. But every day it got a little easier. And looking back at that experience, that I think is what taught me resiliency and grit. It was the fact that I did a really hard thing, but because I just kept focusing on one more day, what am I accomplishing today? Looking back 6 months later, I had accomplished a lot. I had built friendships, I had built a community in an entirely new country, and I could take a step back and feel a real sense of accomplishment and I was really proud of myself for having stuck out what was a really challenging situation. And I think that is what I apply when I have bad days or bad weeks in running these businesses. I'm like, well, running this business is actually not as hard as moving to a new country where you don't really speak the language and you don't really know any people. Like, I've done harder things in my life. And so I try to come back to that of, I am someone who has resiliency. I can have grit, as much as sometimes it feels like I just want to give up. And I'm like, why does this have to be so hard? Why can nothing go right? I know that as I even look back at the first 6 months of the business, I'm really proud of what we've accomplished. And each day was really hard. But as I look at the bigger picture, I am really excited about the progress we made and the growth. And so I think that to me is the biggest thing that I learned through travel is like the individual experiences, especially if you're solo traveling, especially as a female traveler, they can be challenging, they can be demoralizing at times.
Yeah.
But you learn how to be resilient, you learn how to solve problems on your own. And then when you take a step back and you look at the big picture of your travel or the big picture of having accomplished something, you're like, wow, I did that. And I know that because I've done this once, I can do hard things again in the future. And so I really do think that travel is one of the best ways to build resiliency and independence and problem solving, especially when you're younger. And I hope that everybody has the chance, even if it's just going to a different city where you've never visited in the US by yourself. I think taking a solo trip as a woman, it's daunting, it's scary. I don't like eating at restaurants by myself, but I think challenging yourself to do that is really important because you learn that you can be a lot more independent and you don't have to always have people there to make an experience special. You can do things on your own.
Yeah, I love eating at restaurants alone, but it's so hard in the States because unless you're at a hotel, people are like, why is she by herself? And I'm like, in Europe, I go everywhere by myself or South
Yeah.
America or anywhere else. And I just go and I sit and I have my Kindle in Italy, I'll people watch and just have a glass of wine by myself and get to like have that moment and just be like, wow, like I'm sitting here having lunch in Italy, just sitting steps away from the Colosseum, like enjoying like a Roman holiday here. And I love that. And then in America, I'm like, I can't go to eat alone. People will judge me here because
Yeah.
it's something they're used to seeing, where we like women just can go by themselves, read a book, and take themselves to dinner. And it's so interesting. It was one of my goals for this year is to try to dine more in America alone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see how
Uh,
that goes. TBD, it's a goal on the list.
that's awesome.
Well, as we're wrapping up, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing these stories and sharing, how you've become so accomplished and giving these tips to the listeners. I have one final question I do ask all of my listeners. If you could give one piece of advice to your 16-year-old self, what would that be?
It is actually something which I have to credit my husband for. And I think that being a man teaches you this much better than women learn, which is I always felt like I had to have the perfect resume. I had to be overqualified for anything that I wanted to apply to. I think this is a very common trap that most women fall into where you never quite feel like you're ready for that next job or that next part of your career. And you end up spending way longer getting all of these accolades and getting all of these points, bullet points on your resume just to apply to the next thing. And when I had fallen very much into that trap about 4 or 5 years ago, my husband was like, why do you feel like you have to do all of these things before you just apply for that job? Like, just apply. And I was like, no, I'm not qualified. And he's like, yeah, I think you can apply. And
Man.
he was always exactly. And I was like, wow, actually, you're right. Like, let me just give it a shot and let me just apply. And it's how I got my private equity job. By no means did I think that I was qualified for that, but I took the risk, I applied, and it turns out they thought I was qualified. And so I think that oftentimes as a young woman, you are actually your worst enemy at your career advancement because you don't think you're qualified. You fall into the trap of imposter syndrome. It's really easy to feel like, well, let me go get this other promotion first and then this third promotion before I go be a CEO. And it's like, no, you probably have the skills to be a CEO of a small business already. If you are hardworking, if you're good at solving problems, if you like listening to people, you'll figure it out. It's not rocket science. You don't need to have 10 advanced degrees to be a CEO or to found a company. Ultimately, it's really just about having a mindset of, I'm going to take on this new growth or this new risk. I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to keep pivoting until I figure out how to be successful. And so I really do think if, as much as I don't like saying, women should be more like men, I do think that men have that perspective of, I may not be qualified for this, but I'm going to apply
They think
anyways
they
and get
can
the
land
job.
planes. Like,
Yeah. And
they do a
I
lot.
think that if when you fall into that period of you're like, well, I really want this job or I really want to start a business, but oh no, I don't know how to do that. Make sure that you're not letting that self-doubt be the thing that's stopping you from applying for the job or taking that next big leap into entrepreneurship, because more than likely you'll succeed and you'll be surprised by how you didn't have to do 10 steps to get from A to B. You could have just gone A to B.
I mean, the imposter syndrome runs deep and it runs as long as women are functioning, for crying out loud. Like I'm applying to jobs now. I have had an amazing career, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm a capital P professional and I'm still like, well, I don't know, maybe not. And now I'm like, you're trying to get over it. Now I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to apply for everything. Let's see what happens. But like my favorite poster on my wall for listeners that don't see on YouTube, we've got my office is a bunch of inspirational quotes, but it's carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man. And that's what we all need to do because they have confidence coming out the wazoo. And I'm like, I just want a little slice of that. A little
Yeah.
bit.
So I do think, yeah, there's a lot of wasted time and steps. Not because the world says we can't do things, but I think because we doubt ourselves. And I'm guilty of it all the time, but I do try to come back to that and be like, okay, if this is what I really want, let me just apply and see how it lands. The worst thing you can hear is no. And honestly, it's not that big of a deal if someone says no.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Pimp yourself out. Tell everybody where they can find you on LinkedIn, on Instagram, the businesses, all that jazz.
Yeah. So on LinkedIn, if you're interested in especially, entrepreneurship through acquisition or buying a business, I'm always happy to chat and connect. So it's Katherine Butler Dines on LinkedIn. And then my two businesses, one is Affinity Travel Co. and we run offsites and custom travel for corporate businesses. So if you are in needs of planning a corporate offsite, a team retreat, leadership retreat, anything like that, it's affinitytravel.co. So just co. And then if you're a woman who is looking for the ability to travel with a small group of other women, maybe you're looking for that first solo travel experience but aren't totally comfortable going by yourself. That is why Women Travel Abroad exists. We run small group trips for 6 to 10 women all over the world. We'll have been to 24 different countries in 2025. And so you can find us at womentravelabroad.com or send me an email at Catherine@womentravelabroad.com. I'm always happy to talk about solo travel and recommend different trip itineraries, etc.
That's awesome. And I hope everybody looks into it. I know that I have loved the group travel life and I've made some of my best friends from it. And, they have become lifelong friends and we literally bonded over our love for travel and being able to do these things. So I highly recommend it to all women. I think it's something that everyone should try at least once in their life. Thank you for coming on, Catherine. And I
Yeah.
appreciate this. This was so interesting. And listeners, we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.